For today's top stories, let's go over to the CBN News Desk.
Gordon, American flights are avoiding Ukrainian airspace near the Russian border after a Malaysian airliner crashed in the area Thursday. At least 295 passengers were on board, possibly including 23 Americans. Russian separatists are believed responsible for shooting down the plane with a surface-to-air missile. Gary Lane has the story on the crash investigation.
Along the flight path of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, passports, clothing, and human bodies. Some passengers still found strapped into their seats. Rescue workers, including police officers and local coal miners, sift through the debris in eastern Ukraine, all looking for clues on what may have caused the crash. But world leaders say the cause is clear.
Not an accident blown out of the sky.
This looks less like an accident than a crime.
U.S. intelligence officials say the Boeing 777 was shot down by a surface-to-air missile as it flew over eastern Ukraine from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. The pilot was forced to fly a more northerly route because of thunderstorms, and that took the plane and all 295 passengers on a path over territory occupied by Russian separatists. Witnesses described loud explosions, and one villager 25 miles from the Russian border said there was fighting, and then he heard shooting in the sky. U.S. federal aviation officials and FBI investigators are heading to the crash site. The separatist rebels say they've found most of the recording devices. The concern now that they'll turn those over to the Russians. That may likely lead to a biased investigation. That's because the Russians have been accused of supplying the separatists with arms to fight the Ukrainian government. Did the supplied armaments include surface-to-air missiles? And are the rebels responsible for the shootdown? Rebels deny responsibility, but the Ukrainian government says it intercepted a phone call in which separatists at the crash scene reportedly told Russian military intelligence, quote, "We have shot down a plane."
An international team must have full access to the crash site, and no one should interfere with the area or move any debris, including the black box.
Meanwhile, back in Amsterdam, at least one couple was thankful they didn't board Malaysia Flight 17.
We were supposed to be in that flight, and it's obviously, something watching over us and saying, no, don't get on that flight. Gary
Lane, CBN News.
Israel is strengthening its ground offensive into Gaza. It's aimed at stopping the Hamas rockets fired at Israeli cities. Chris Mitchell has that story from the border between Israel and Gaza.
Israeli tanks and foot soldiers crossed the border fence into Gaza late Thursday evening, as seen in this footage from the IDF. The ground operation began several hours ago, and except for the occasional flare, Gaza City is locked in total darkness. And in that darkness, Hamas and Israel are locked in a life-and-death struggle. From midnight to mid-morning Friday, Israel attacked more than 100 terror targets throughout the Gaza Strip. The morning after the ground campaign began, explosions are still being heard from Gaza City as the IDF continues the next stage in Operation Protective Edge to stop rocket fire from Hamas-controlled territory. The IDF sent messages to Gazans to leave their homes in areas near the border and places of fighting. They warned them Israel would be using massive firepower. Israel says the goal of the extended operation is to uncover terror tunnels, destroy the Hamas infrastructure, and return quiet to southern Israeli communities.
The goal remains the same. The goal is to protect our people. I mean, over the last 10 days, we've had some 1,500 rockets fired by the terrorists in Gaza against our people. We've had barrage after barrage on our cities. And we are taking action, as I think any democratic government would do, to protect our people.
Friday morning, Hamas continued to fire rockets at southern Israeli communities, sending Israelis to their shelters.
Hamas have to be on the run. They cannot be an authority that is responsible for the Gaza Strip and expect to carry out terrorist attacks against us. They have to realize that there is a price to pay when you stand behind, initiate, and engage in terrorism.
For now, Israel seems to have limited backing from the international community. Even Egypt blamed Hamas for the ground incursion, saying that Hamas had refused attempts at a ceasefire. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the Israeli-Gaza border.
Here at home, a new movie called Persecuted opens in theaters today. It's about the possibility of Christian persecution here in America. Wendy Griffith brings us that story in this edition of Family Entertainment News.
There are those who claim that your ministry is intolerant, that your crusades may even threaten the freedoms of others.
Freedom is fragile and costly and must constantly be defended.
Daniel, what inspired you to write Persecuted?
The Holy Spirit inspired me to write Persecuted. I woke up one morning and it was there. The government is trying to take control of everything, including the very source that gave our country its foundation, which is biblical truth.
I cannot water down the gospel to advance.
James Remar plays lead character, evangelist John Luther.
Tell me about John Luther.
John Luther is the hero of our story, and he becomes a major evangelist at the level of a Billy Graham at a time when America becomes an unwelcoming environment for the gospel. And he's discredited. He is tarnished.
So, John, what is your opinion of the primary tenets of the Faith and Fairness Act?
Fox News anchor Gretchen Carlson and I both have roles in Persecuted. She as the news anchor who questions John Luther's motives, and myself as a legal expert who talks about Luther's checkered past.
And leaving the scene of an accident. Talk about a relapse.
So basically you have a famous evangelist, John Luther, who is framed for murder by a member of Congress because he's standing in the way of the sweeping religious reform. Is this really fantasy, or is this something that you could actually envision happening in America?
It really is beginning because we allow ourselves to be silenced in the name of political correctness.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
A Christian baker in suburban Denver has appealed an order that requires him to prepare wedding cakes for gay couples. Jack Phillips was sued by a gay couple after he refused to make a cake for their marriage in 2012. He says that would violate the Christian principles by which he runs his business. Operation Blessing is aiding Israeli families under threat of rockets from Gaza. Bomb shelters in private homes, as well as local parks and bus stops, are quickly running out of supplies as families spend more and more time in them. Families are in need of water, food, diapers, baby food, and drinks. Operation Blessing's teams are packing up boxes of food and other supplies to replenish local bomb shelters in border towns. Remember, you can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to its website, ob.org.